And we're now talking to Cindy Emch. Cindy, could you tell me a bit about your career as a singer?
Sure. My career as a singer, honestly, it kind of started when I was about 7 years old. Because my mom used to play accordion, and so I would always sing along with her while she was practicing, and that's where I really developed my love of singing. And then fast forward a whole bunch of time to the early 2000s, and I formed 3 different bands all at once just to see which one kind of would stick, because it was a good time. I'd started playing accordion by then as well, so I had a band called Vagabondage and Rhubarb Whiskey and the Oakland Wine Drinkers Union, and we just had a great time. We did a lot of murder ballads and drinking songs and kind of sea shanties depending on the band. And then since we're in the Bay Area, I lost a lot of band members to the rising rents, and people had to move away. So I started a new band that was just me, with my name, and then I have a revolving cast of musicians that join me on stage. We're usually like a 4 or 5 piece band, but if anyone needs to move because they can't afford it anymore, then somebody new just swaps in, and I stay the same. So I've been doing that act since about 2015, and we're just now in May releasing our 4th record, and very, very excited. And my influences really go back to Mildred Bailey and old Willie Dixon songs to more modern folks like Nico Case or Emmylou Harris, and just kind of over the gamut of folks to just pull influences from, as long as I have a deeper voice, so I just I'm drawn towards. Leonard Cohen is also a huge influence, right? But I tried to sing like him, and my voice doesn't go quite that deep, but that's really where I'm coming from as a musician.
What's the music scene like in the Bay Area these days? You mentioned the rent situation there.
The music scene is actually pretty wonderful. Right now, I think it's really interesting that there is a kind of a community of California country musicians out in the Bay Area. There's about 10 or 15 bands that we're gigging all the time. We play a lot of shows together. It's a real mix of women singers and male singers and non-binary folks and queer country musicians, and it sort of has all of that inclusive diversity of the Bay Area. But the thing that's really interesting to me is that I've noticed the more diverse a country music scene is, the more traditional they approach the music as. So a lot of folks singing kind of classic country style music with a lot of lap steel and things that you feel like you would have heard back in the 50s or 60s, but putting their own spin on it now. But definitely not really going in kind of the country pop direction, but a lot more traditional.
Why do you think they gravitate more toward the traditional sounds of country?
Well, speaking as a queer country musician, one of the reasons that I do is that me and a lot of other musicians who kind of don't fit into maybe what our families thought we should be, we've had to leave our location, our homes, our places of origin where we grew up, because it felt unsafe or unwelcoming, and we kind of were driven to cities where there was a community that would support us, where we could just live our lives and be regular. But there's always this nostalgia and longing for the music we grew up with. And I'm from a really rural farm town in Michigan originally, and I heard country music and the Beach Boys my entire childhood. And, when I wanted to start singing country music and really pull into that music I grew up with, the stuff that I was inspired by was more traditional. It was from the 50s to the 70s, and it was just really, that's where my songwriting landed, because that's what I am most familiar with, and that's kind of what has my heart.
I'm curious. There have been other gay country artists as well who've been playing around here. Would you say there is a fertile queer country movement?
I would say there is. I think it's been growing over the past 10 years or so. I'm good friends with Patrick Haggerty from Lavender Country, and they were the first out country band from 1973. And I played a show with him yesterday, playing another one today. And he's kind of the loving granddad of country music for a lot of us. And he has really helped kind of embrace and encourage a lot of the other queer country musicians that are coming up right now, like Paisley Fields and Mia Byrne and Mercy Bell. And, people are starting to, in this community, we're starting to get label deals, and we're getting, a little bit more attention in the mainstream press. And I do think that there is a yearning for, music that's inclusive. Like I'm a queer country musician, but I feel like my music can be enjoyed by everyone. And there are some love songs that I've written to my wife that are in like a classic, waltz time that I always see like some wonderful older like straight couple waltzing to them on, in front of the stage. And it warms my heart. I want it to be an inclusive experience that's just about good songs, but that there's no gatekeepers holding people back just because of who you are as a person.
Country, on the one hand, country music is sort of being conservative, but there are certainly artists like Willie Nelson,
right,
who just endorsed Beto O'Rourke and is pro-legalization of pot.
Yeah, I find that I've actually done a lot of reading on the subject. I'm kind of a pop culture nerd when I'm not being a musician, and there's a long history of country music being very progressive, and it comes out of, in the 20s, a lot of blues musicians and country musicians were actually all just in the same bands playing the same honky-tonks. And there's a great book called it's called The Honky Tonk on the Left, and it's about specifically like the labor and democratic and sort of power to the people kind of roots of country music. And then there's also a book by Nadine Hubbs called Rednecks, Queers in Country Music that really talks about like some long-standing like traditions and integration in country music that I feel like there's a mainstream narrative that started when the Nixon presidential campaign wanted to use country music to sort of like reinforce their quote unquote like American values and really like tailor it to a specific audience. That was really when politics tried to co-opt like this music of like rural farmer working class people and use it as a little like flag of like, hey, we're for you, and like make it more conservative. And there's always money in politics, and there's always money in taking it different directions. So that's definitely been one angle that the marketing folks have used to kind of veer country to the right a little bit.
On the other hand, you get people like Dolly Parton, who played last night, who has always, expressed a lot of support for her LGBT fans, even though she doesn't talk about politics. She is very pro-gay rights.
Yeah, I really think, Dolly is wonderful. I have, like, a lot of my Wi-Fi password at home is St. Dolly, because I just love her so much. I'll probably change it after this interview. But I think that one of the things that I think is really important in music in general is that if the songs are good and you actually have this, like, you can lead with empathy and have compassion for where everyone's coming from, there's a way to come together as a community and as a people through song, regardless of what your political, leanings are. I come from a pretty conservative family. Like, I did strike lines for, teachers unions with my mom when I was a kid, but like they're pretty, not right wing, but right leaning these days. And what I've found is that if you really come to the table with an intention of just knowing each other as people, it doesn't have to be so contentious. Like you can find common ground, and frequently you can find it through music or other kind of art, and that to me is something really important to bring into the world, because I don't think any of us are going to get to a better or happier place by fighting with each other all the time.
I'm wondering if you hear from, say, queer country fans who relate to your songs.
Absolutely. I've had a lot of queer fans kind of approach me and just thank them they thank me for helping them feel more visible, for helping them feel like there's a space for them to hear this music live that, it's in the style that they grew up with and they don't feel safe at a lot of other shows. And, it's just about trying to create a space where everyone can come together around music. And I definitely have gotten a lot of emails and people coming up after shows and tears in their eyes and just being like, thank you for like creating this space to hold. And, it can be a really powerful moment. As a singer too, like you see people in the audience sometimes and they're just like suddenly feeling very, very free to totally be themselves and just like lose themselves to the music. And that's just one of the best feelings you can have in the world.